I have returned. Hello. My best friend did my hair, so I decided to give it tribute in this video. No, I was gonna film it anyway. There's candy. There's candy on my footrest. There we go. Alright, here we go. Atmosphere. London, September 1891. The circus has arrived near London, the train creeping in just after nightfall without drawing any notice. The train cars collapse. Doors and halls sliding apart, silently forming chains of windowless rooms. Canvas stripes unfurl around them, uncoiled ropes snapping taut, and platforms assembling themselves amongst carefully draped curtains. Oh my god, I love this! The next paragraph is in parentheses. The company assumes that there is a crew that accomplishes this feat while they unpack their trunks, though some aspects of the translation are clearly automated. This was once the case, but now there is no crew, no unseen stagehands moving bits of scenery to their proper places. They are no longer necessary. And parentheses. The tents sit quiet and dark, as the circus will not be open to the public until the following evening. While most of the performers are spending the night in the city visiting old friends and favorite pubs, Celia Bowen sits alone in her backstage suite. Her rooms are modest in comparison to others hidden behind the circus tents, but they are filled with books and well-worn furniture. That sounds perfect. Mismatched candles burn merrily on every available surface, illuminating the sleepy doves in their cages hanging among sweeping curtains of richly colored tapestries. A cozy sanctuary, comfortable and quiet. Oh my god, that sounds amazing! Oh my god! Okay, I'm not tearing up about this description of someone's room, not at all. Right. The knock on the door comes as a surprise. Is this how you intend to spend your entire night? Tsukiko asks, glancing at the book in Celia's hand. I take it you came to suggest an alternative, Celia asks. The contortionist does not often visit solely for the sake of visiting. I have a social engagement, and I thought you might join me, Tsukiko says. You spend too much time in solitude. Celia attempts to protest, but Tsukiko is insistent, taking out one of Celia's finest gowns, one of few with any color, a deep blue velvet embellished with pale gold. Ooh, pretty. Very Ravenclaw. Where are we going? Celia asks, but Tsukiko refuses to say. It is too late an hour for their destination to be the theater or the ballet. Celia laughs when they arrive at La Maison Lefebvre. You could have told me, she says to Tsukiko. Then it would not have been a surprise, Tsukiko responds. Celia has attended only a single function at La Maison Lefebvre. Really? Oh my god! And that was more pre-circus opening reception than proper midnight dinner. Oh my god, I fucking love the midnight dinners, okay? But despite visiting the house on only a handful of occasions between her audition and the opening of the circus, she finds she's already acquainted with each of the guests. Her arrival with Tsukiko is a surprise to the rest of them, but she's greeted warmly by Chandresh and swept into the parlor with a glass of champagne in her hand before she can apologize for her unexpected presence. See that they set an additional place for dinner, Chandresh says to Marco before taking her on a cursory spin around the room to make sure she has met everyone. Celia finds it odd that he does not seem to remember. Madame Padva is gracious as always, her gown the warm copper of autumn leaves glowing in the candlelight. The Burgess sisters and Mr. Barris have apparently already been making light of the fact that three of them have all worn various shades of blue, an unplanned detail, and Celia's gown is cited as proof that it must simply be in fashion. There is some mention of another guest that may or may not be attending, but Celia does not catch his name. Yeah, don't show your face here, Alexander. Nobody likes you. She feels slightly out of place in this gathering of people who have known each other for so long, but Tsukiko makes a point of including her in the conversation, and Mr. Barris pays such attention to her every word when she does speak that Lady begins to tease him about it. While Celia knows Mr. Barris quite well, having met him several times and exchanged dozens of letters, he does an impressive job of pretending that they're mere acquaintances. You should have been an actor, she whispers to him when she is certain no one else will overhear. I know, he replies, sounding genuinely sad. Such a shame I missed my true calling. Celia has never spoken with either of the Burgess sisters at much length, Lainey is more talkative than Tara, and tonight she learns in greater detail the touches that they have put on the circus. While Madame Padva's costumes and Mr. Bear's feats of engineering are obvious, the mark of the Burgess sisters is more subtle, though it permeates almost every aspect of the circus. The scents, the music, the quality of the light, even the weight of the velvet curtains at the entrance. They have arranged each element to appear effortless. We like to hit all of the senses, Lainey says. Some more than others, Tara adds. True, her sister agrees. Scent is often underestimated when it can be the most evocative. They are brilliant with atmosphere, Chandresh remarks to Celia as he joins their conversation, switching her empty glass of champagne with a freshly poured replacement. Both of them absolutely brilliant. The trick is to make it seem as though none of it is purposeful, Lainey whispers, to make the artificial feel natural. To tie all the elements together, Tara finishes. It seems to Celia that they provide a similar service within the present company. Celia doubts that these gatherings would have continued so long after the circus began without the Burgess sisters' infectious, bubbling laughter. They ask the perfect questions to keep the conversation flowing, warding off any lulls. That is a subtle superpower, I fucking swear. People are strange creatures. Alright, and Mr. Barris provides an ideal contrast, serious and attentive, keeping the dynamic of the group in balance. A movement in the hall catches Celia's eye, and while anyone else might have credited a number of candles or mirrors for the reflection, she knows the cause immediately. Go away, Hector. Nobody likes you. She steps out into the hall unnoticed, slipping out of sight into the shadowed library across from the parlor. It is lit only by a panel of stained glass stretching in a glowing sunset along one wall, sending its warm hue cascading over the closest shelves and letting the rest of the room fall into shadow. Oh my god, that sounds beautiful. Can I not have one evening to enjoy myself without you following me? Celia whispers into the darkness. I do not think social engagements of this sort are a proper use of your time, her father replies, the sunset light catching part of his face and the front of his shirt in a distorted column of red. You do not get to dictate how I spend every moment of my time, Papa. You are losing your focus, Hector replies. I cannot lose my focus, Celia says. Between new tents and embellishments, I actively control a significant part of the circus, which is closed at the moment, if you hadn't noticed. And the better I know these people, the better I can manipulate what they've already done. They created it, after all. I suppose that is a valid point, Hector says. Every time this man speaks, I just want to, make a lot of noise and, kick him out. Celia suspects he is scowling despite the admission, though it's too dark to tell. But you do well to remember that you have no reason to trust anyone in that room. Leave me alone, Papa, Celia says and sighs. Miss Bowen? A voice asks behind her and she turns, surprised to see Chandrish's assistant standing in the doorway watching her. Dinner is about to begin. If you would care to join the rest of the guests in the dining room. My apologies, Celia says, her eyes darting back to the shadows, but her father has vanished. I was distracted by the size of the library. I did not think anyone would notice I was missing. I am certain that they would, Marco says, though I have been distracted by the library myself many times. The charming smile that accompanies the statement catches Celia off guard, as she has rarely seen anything but varying degrees of reserved attentiveness or occasional nervousness on his countenance. Poor Marco. Thank you for coming to fetch me, she says, hoping that dinner guests talking to themselves while supposedly perusing books without the aid of proper lighting is not an unusual occurrence at La Maison Lefebvre. I don't think it is. They likely suspect you vanished into thin air, Marco responds as they walk through the hall. I thought perhaps that was not the case. He holds each door open for her as he escorts her to the dining room. Celia is seated between Chandresh and Tsukiko. This is preferable to spending the evening alone, is it not? Tsukiko asks, smiling when Celia admits that it's true. As the courses progress, when she's not distracted by the astounding quality of the food, Celia makes a game of deciphering the relationships between the guests, reading the ways they interact, intuiting the emotions hidden beneath the laughter and the conversation, catching the places that gazes linger. Chandrish's glances at his handsome assistant grow more obvious with each glass of wine, and Celia suspects Mr. Alasdair is well aware of it, though Marco remains a quiet presence at the edge of the room. What? Mr. Alasdair? Who's that? Is it Marco? God, I'm so bad at names. I'm sorry. I'll just keep going. It takes her 3 courses to determine which of the Burgess sisters Mr. Barris favors. But by the time the artfully arranged plates of what appear to be whole pigeons spiced with cinnamon arrive, she's certain, though she cannot tell if Lainey herself knows. Madame Padva is called Tante. God, I'm probably mispronouncing that, I'm sorry. Tante? Tante. I'm gonna say Tante. By the entire company, though she feels more like a matriarch than merely an aunt. When Celia addresses her as Madame, everyone turns to look at her in surprise. So proper for a circus girl, Madame Padva says with a gleam in her eye. We shall have to loosen those corset laces if we intend to keep you as an intimate dinner company. I expected the corset unlacing would take place after dinner, Celia says mildly, earning a chorus of laughter. We shall be keeping Miss Bowen as intimate company regardless of the state of her corset, Chandra says. Make a note of that, he says, waving a hand at Marco. Miss Bowen's corset is duly noted, sir, Marco replies, and laughter bubbles over the table again. That's adorable! Marco catches Celia's glance with a hint of the smile from earlier before he turns away, fading into the background again almost as easily as her father vanishes into the shadows. The next course arrives, and Celia returns to listening and observing, in between trying to figure out if the meat, disguised in featherlight pastry and delicate wine sauce, is actually lamb or something more exotic. Oh my god, I can't read this when I'm hungry. Now I want all of this. There is something about Tara's behavior that Celia finds bothersome, something almost haunted in her expression that comes and goes. One moment she's actively engaged in the conversation, her laugh echoing her sister's, and the next she seems distant, staring through the dripping candles. It's only when the echoed laugh sounds almost like a sob for a moment that Celia realizes Tara reminds her of her own mother. The dessert courts halt the conversation entirely. Oh my god, I love this one! Globes of thinly blown sugar sit on each plate and must be broken open in order to access the clouds of cream within. After the cacophony of shattering sugar, it does not take long for the diners to realize that, though the globes appear identical, each of them has been presented with an entirely unique flavor. There's much sharing of spoons, and while some are easily guessed as ginger with peach or a curried coconut, others remain delicious mysteries. Celia's is clearly honey, but with a blend of spices beneath the sweetness that nobody is able to place. Oh my god, when I remembered this, I forgot and I thought it was chocolate globes, not sugar globes. Not that there's that much of a difference, but god damn, that sounds amazing. After dinner, the conversation continues over coffee and brandy in the parlor until an hour most of the guests deem extremely late, but Tsukiko points out that it's comparatively early for the circus girls. When they do begin to say their goodbyes, Celia is embraced no differently than anyone else and given several invitations to meet for tea while the circus remains in London. Thank you, she says to Tsukiko as they leave. I enjoyed that more than I'd expected to. The finest of pleasures are always the unexpected ones, Tsukiko replies. Marco watches from the window as the guests depart, catching a last glimpse of Celia before she disappears into the night. He does a round through the parlor and the dining room, and then downstairs to the kitchens to make sure everything is in order. The rest of the staff has already departed. He extinguishes the last of the lights before ascending several flights to check on Chandrash. God, that sentence was a tongue twister. To check on Chandrash. Brilliant dinner tonight, don't you think? Chandrash asks when Marco reaches the suite that comprises the entire 5th story. Holy shit, how many floors does this mansion have? I mean, maison, but I think of it as a mansion, and I'm sure it's probably a mansion. Anyway, each room lit by a multitude of Moroccan lanterns that cast fractured shadows over the opulent furniture. Indeed, sir, Marco says. Nothing on the agenda for tomorrow, though, or later today, whatever time it is. There's a meeting in the afternoon regarding next season's ballet schedule. Ah, I had forgotten. Chandrash says, cancel that, would you? Of course, sir, Marco says, taking a notebook from his pocket and marking down the request. Oh, and order a dozen cases of whatever that brandy was that Ethan brought. Marvelous stuff, that is. Marco nods, adding it to his notes. You're not leaving, are you? Chandrash asks. No, sir, Marco says. I had thought it too late to be going home. Home, Chandrash repeats as though the word sounds foreign. This is your home as much as that flat you insist on keeping is. More so, even. I shall endeavor to remember that, sir, Marco says. Miss Bowen is a lovely woman, don't you think? Chandrash remarks suddenly, turning to gauge the reaction to the question. Caught by surprise, Marco only managed to stammer something he hopes resembles his standard impartial agreement. "We must invite her to dinner whenever the circus is in town, so we might get to know her better," Chandra says pointedly, emphasizing his statement with a satisfied grin. "Yes, sir," Marco says, struggling to keep his expression impassive. "Will that be all for tonight?" Chandrash laughs as he waves him away. Before he retires to his room, a suite 3 times the size of his flat, Marco quietly returns to the library. He stands for some time in the spot where he found Celia hours before, scrutinizing the familiar bookshelves and the wall of stained glass. He cannot guess what she might have been doing, and he does not notice the eyes staring at him from the shadows. "Stop being such a creeper, Hector! Get a life!" "I'm sorry, you don't have a life. You're like a weird ghost now." Reverse. Oh my god, I fucking love this chapter. 1891 to 1892. Herr Friedrich Thiessen receives the card in the mail, a plain envelope amongst his invoices and business correspondence. The envelope holds no letter or note, simply a card that is black on one side and white on the other. Le Cercle de Rêve is printed on the front in silver ink. On the back, handwritten in black ink on white, it reads, 29 September, just outside Dresden, Saxony. Herr Thiessen can barely contain his glee. Same. He makes arrangements with his clients, finishes his clocks in progress in record time, and secures a short-term flat rental in Dresden. He arrives in Dresden on September 28th and spends the day wandering the outskirts of the city, wondering where the circus might set up. There's no indication of its impending arrival, only a slight electricity in the air. Though Herr Thiessen is unsure if anyone save himself can sense it. He feels honored at having been given advance notice. On September 29th, he sleeps in, anticipating the late night ahead. When he leaves his flat in the early afternoon to find something to eat, the streets are already buzzing with the news. A strange circus has appeared overnight just west of the city. A gargantuan thing with striped tents, they're saying when he reaches the pub. Never seen anything like it. Herr Thiessen stays silent on the matter, enjoying the excitement and curiosity around him. Shortly before sunset, Herr Thiessen heads west, finding the circus easily, as there is a large crowd assembled outside already. While he waits for the crowd, he wonders how the circus manages to set up so quickly. Whoops. He's certain that the field it sits in now, as though it has always been there, had been empty the day before when he walked around the city. The circus has simply materialized. Like magic, he overhears someone remark, and Herr Thiessen has to agree. When the gates open at last, Herr Friedrich Thiessen feels as though he's returning home after extended absence. Holy shit! Oh my god. Okay. I'm gonna keep reading. Okay. He spends almost every night there, and during the day he sits in his rented flat or at a pub with a glass of wine and a journal and writes about it. Pages and pages of observations recounting his experiences, mostly so he will not forget them, but also to capture something of the circus on paper, something he can hold on to. I have a whole book of it! I'm so lucky. He occasionally converses about the circus with his fellow pub dwellers. One of these is a man who edits the city paper, and after some persuading and several glasses of wine, he manages to get Friedrich to show him the journal. After a shot or two of bourbon, he convinces Friedrich to allow excerpts of it to be published in the newspaper. The circus departs Dresden in late October, but the newspaper editor keeps his word. The article is well received and followed by another, and then another. Herr Thiessen continues to write. Oh, sorry, I got a text. Herr Thiessen continues to write, and over the following months, some of the articles are printed in other German papers, and eventually they are translated and printed in Sweden and Denmark and France. Ooh, you're becoming a little bit of a celebrity. Okay, sorry. Text. My best friend is texting me, asking me about lunch. Because I texted her about lunch earlier. But I'll finish this first, and I'll figure out what I'm doing for lunch later. Alright, one article finds its way into a London paper, printed under the title, Nights at the Circus. It is these articles that make Herr Friedrich Thiessen the unofficial leader, the figurehead of those most ardent followers of the circus. Some are introduced to Le Cercle de Rêve through his writing, while others feel an instant connection with him as they read his words, an affinity for this man who experiences the circus as they do, as something wondrous and inimitable. Ooh, I don't really remember what that word means. I'll have to look it up later. Some seek him out, and the meetings and dinners that follow herald the formation of a kind of club, a society of lovers of the circus. The title of Revers begins as a joke, but it sticks, secure in its appropriateness. Herr Thiessen enjoys this immensely, being surrounded by kindred spirits from all over Europe, and occasionally even farther, who will discuss the circus endlessly. He transcribes the stories of other Revers to include in his writings. He constructs small keepsake clocks for them depicting their favorite acts or performances. Oh my god, this man is so precious! One of these is a marvel of tiny flying acrobats on ribbons made for a young woman who spends most of her hours at the circus in that massive tent staring upwards. Oh! He even somewhat unintentionally starts a fashion trend amongst the Revers. He comments at a dinner in Munich, where many of the dinners are held near his home, though they are also held in London and Paris and countless other cities as well. That when he attends the circus, he prefers to wear a black coat, to better blend in with his surroundings and to feel a part of a circus. But with it, he wears a scarf in a brilliant scarlet to distinguish himself from it as well, as a reminder that he is, at heart, a spectator, an observer. Word spreads quickly in such select circles, and so begins a tradition of Revers attending Le Cirque de Rêve decked in black or white or gray, with a single shock of red, a scarf or hat, or if the weather is warm, a red rose tucked into a lapel or behind an ear. It's also quite helpful for spotting other Revers, a simple signal for those in the know. There are those who have the means, and even some who do not, but creatively manage anyway. Sounds like me. To follow the circus from location to location. There's no set itinerary that is public knowledge. Alright, I'm back. Mom brought me a suitcase because I do not own a suitcase, and I'm going on a trip and I need a suitcase. Because I learned my lesson. I went to visit my friend in Minnesota, and I brought a backpack and a bag, and no suitcase. And wandering around the airport for 2 hours with things on my back. Very painful. Very, very, very not fun. Okay. The circus moves from place to place every few weeks, with the occasional extended break, and no one truly knows where it might appear until the tents are already erected in a field, in a city, or the countryside, or somewhere in between. But there are those people, select Revers, who are familiar with the circus and its ways, who have made polite acquaintance of the proper individuals and are notified of impending locations, and they in turn notify others in other cities, in other countries. The most common method is subtle and works both in person and by post. They send cards. Small rectangular cards, much like postcards that vary but are always black on one side and white on the other. Some use actual postcards, others choose to make their own. The cards state simply, the circus is coming, and list the location. Sometimes there's a date, but not always. The circus functions in approximations more than exacting details, but the notification and location is often enough. Here comes another page, another bookmark page. Most Revers have a home base and prefer not to travel terribly far. Revers who call it Canada home may be hesitant to travel to Russia, but easily make extended visits to Boston or Chicago, while those in Morocco may travel to many destinations in Europe, but perhaps not all the way to China or Japan. Some, though, follow the circus wherever it may lead, through money or luck or extensive favors from other Revers. Oh my god, that would be amazing. I would not be able to do that at all. I'd be able to go, like, maybe if it was in my region, but but they are all Revers, each in their own way, even those who only have the means to visit the circus when it comes to them, rather than the other way around. They smile when they spot each other. They meet at local pubs to have drinks and chat while they wait impatiently for the sun to set. It is these aficionados, these Revers, who see the details in the bigger picture of the circus. They see the nuance of the costumes, the intricacy of the signs. They buy sugar flowers and do not eat them, wrapping them in paper instead and carefully bringing them home. They are enthusiasts, devotees, addicts. Something about the circus stirs their souls, and they ache for it when it is absent. Can you tell how much I love this book, okay? They seek each other out. These people of such specific like minds. They tell of how they found the circus, how those first few steps were like magic, like stepping into a fairy tale under a curtain of stars. They pontificate upon the fluffiness of the popcorn, the sweetness of the chocolate. God, my nose is really red! They spend hours discussing the quality of the light, the heat of the bonfire. They sit over their drinks smiling like children and they relish being surrounded by kindred spirits, if only for an evening. When they depart, they shake hands and embrace like old friends, even if they have only just met. And as they go their separate ways, they feel less alone than they had been before. Oh my god. Oh man, this is like the original fandom. The circus knows of them and appreciates them. Often someone will approach the ticket booth in a black coat with a red scarf. Often someone approaching the ticket booth in a black coat with a red scarf will be waved in without paying admission, or given a mug of cider or a bag of popcorn gratis. God, I don't know how to pronounce that. Performers spotting them in the audience will bring out their best tricks. Some of the reverse wander the circus continuously, methodically visiting every tent, watching each performance. Others have their favorite spots, which they rarely leave, choosing to pass the entire night in the menagerie or the Hall of Mirrors. They are the ones who stay the latest, through the small hours when most visitors have gone to seek their beds. Often, just before dawn, there is no color to be seen in the Cirque de Rêve, save for their small splashes of scarlet. Oh my god, that's beautiful. Herr Thiessen receives dozens of letters from other rêveurs, and he responds to each. While some remain single letters, content with their one-time replies, others will evolve into longer exchanges, collections of ongoing conversations. Today, he's replying to a letter he finds particularly intriguing. The author writes about the circus with stunning specificity, and the letter is more personal than most, delving into thoughts on his own writings, observations on his Wunschtraum clock, containing a level of detail that would require observing it for hours on end. He reads the letter 3 times before he sits at his desk to compose his reply. The postmark is from New York, but he does not recognize the signature as belonging to any of the rêveurs he has met in passing in that or any other city. Dear Miss Bowen, he begins. He hopes that he will receive another letter in return. That's adorable! Okay. Collaborations. September to December 1893. Marco arrives at Mr. Barris's London office only a few minutes before his scheduled appointment, surprised to find the normally well-ordered space in near bedlam, full of half-packed crates and stacks of boxes. The desk is nowhere to be seen, buried beneath the chaos. Is it that late already? Mr. Barris asks when Marco knocks on the open door, unable to step inside due to the lack of available floor space. I should have left the clock out. It's in one of those crates. He waves at a line of the large wooden crates along the wall, though if one of them is ticking, it's impossible to tell. And I meant to clear a path as well, he adds, pushing boxes aside and picking up piles of rolled blueprints. Sorry to intrude, Marco says. I wanted to speak with you before you left the city. I would have waited until you were settled again, but I thought it better to discuss the matter in person. Of course, Mr. Barris says. I wanted to give you some of the spare copies of the circus plans. They're around here somewhere. He sifts through the piles of blueprints, checking labels and dates. The office door closes quietly, untouched. May I ask you a question, Mr. Barris? Marco inquires. Certainly, Mr. Barris says, still sorting through rolls of paper. How much do you know? Mr. Barris puts down the blueprint in his hand and turns, pushing his spectacles up on the bridge of his nose to better regard Marco's expression. How much do I know about what? He asks after the pause has gone on too long. How much has Miss Bowen told you? Marco asks in response. Mr. Barris looks at him curiously for a moment before he speaks. You're her opponent, he says, a smile spreading across his face when Marco nods. I never would have guessed. She told you about the competition. That's a weird intonation. I'll try that again. She told you about the competition, Marco says. Only in the most basic of terms, Mr. Barris says. She came to me several years ago and asked what I might say if she were to tell me that everything she does is real. I told her I would have to take her at her word or think her a liar, and I would never dream such a lovely lady to be a liar. And then she asked what I might design if I did not have such constraints as gravity to concern myself with. That was the beginning of the carousel, but I imagine you knew that already. I assumed as much, Marco says, though I was not certain to what degree you were knowingly involved. I'm in the position to be quite useful, as I see it. I believe stage magicians employ engineers to make their tricks appear to be something they are not. In this case, I provide the opposite service, helping actual magic appear to be clever construction. Miss Bowen refers to it as grounding, making the unbelievable believable. Did she have anything to do with the Stargazer? Marco asks. No, the Stargazer is purely mechanical, Mr. Barris says. I can show you the structural plans if I can locate them in this mess. It was inspired by a trip to the Columbian Exposition in Chicago earlier this year. Miss Bowen insisted that there was no way to improve it, though I think she may have done something to She may have something to do with keeping it running properly. Then you are a magician in your own right, sir, Marco says. Perhaps we simply do similar things in different ways, Mr. Bear says. I had thought, knowing Miss Bowen had an opponent lurking somewhere, that whomever you might be, you were not in need of any assistance. The paper animals are astonishing, for example. Thank you, Marco says. I have improvised quite a bit trying to come up with a tense that did not require blueprints. Is that why you're here? Mr. Barris asks for something of the blueprint variety. Primarily, I wanted to be certain about your awareness of the game, Marco says. I could make you forget this entire conversation, you know. Oh, there's no need for such a precaution, Mr. Barris says with a vehement shake of his head. I assure you I'm capable of remaining neutral. I'm not fond of taking sides. I will assist either you or Miss Bowen, as much or as little as you would each prefer, and I shall reveal nothing to the other that you or she tell me in confidence. I will not say a word to anyone else about the matter. You can trust me. Marco writes a toppling pile of boxes while he considers the matter. All right, he says, though I must admit, Mr. Barris, I am surprised at how accepting you are of all this. Mr. Barris chuckles in response. I admit that of the lot of us, I seem the least likely, he says. The world is a much more interesting place than I had ever imagined when I came to that first midnight dinner. Is that because Miss Bowen can animate a solid wooden creature on the carousel, or because you can manipulate my memory, or because the circus itself pushed the boundaries of what I dreamed was possible even before I entertained the thought of actual magic? I cannot say, but I would not trade it for anything. And you will keep my identity from Miss Bowen. I shall not tell her, Mr. Barris says. You have my word. In that case, Marco says, I would appreciate your assistance with something. When the letter arrives, Mr. Barris fears for a moment that Miss Bowen will be upset with the turn of events, or inquire as to who her opponent is, as she will have easily figured out that he is now aware of the fact himself. But when he opens the envelope, the enclosed note reads only, May I make additions to it? He writes back to inform her it has been specifically designed to be manipulated by either side, so she may add whatever she wishes. Oh my god! Okay, this is another one of the places where I bookmarked it. Celia walks through a hallway full of snow, sparkling flakes of it catching in her hair and clinging to the hem of her gown. She holds out her hand, smiling as the crystals dissolve over her skin. The hall is lined with doors, and she chooses the one at the very end, trailing a melting breath of snow behind her as she walks into a room where she must duck to avoid colliding with a cascade of books suspended from the ceiling, pages tumbling out in frozen waves. She reaches a hand out to brush over the paper, the entire room swaying gently as the motion passes from page to page. It takes her quite a while to locate another door hidden in a shadowed corner, and she laughs when her boots sink into the powder-soft sand that fills the room beyond. Celia stands on a shimmering white desert with a sparkling night sky stretching out in every direction. The sense of space is so vast that she must put out her hand in front of her to find the wall hidden in the stars, and it's still a surprise when her fingers hit the solid surface. She feels her way around the star-speckled walls, searching the perimeter for another way out. This is abhorrent, her father says. Her father's voice says, though she cannot see him in the dim light. Stop being such a wet blanket. I could use a stronger word, but right now I can't think of one. You are meant to be working separately, not in this debauched juxtaposition. Wow, okay, that's an impressive dialogue there. Vocabulary. I have warned you about collaborating. It is not the proper way to exhibit your skills. Celia sighs. I think it's quite clever, she says. What better way to compete than within the same tent? And you cannot rightfully call it a collaboration. How can I collaborate with someone whose identity I don't even know? She only catches a glimpse of his face as he glares at her, and then she turns away, returning her attention to the wall. Which is superior then, she asks. A room full of trees or a room filled with sand? Do you even know which ones are mine? This is getting tiring, Papa. My opponent clearly possesses comparable skills. How will you ever determine a winner? That is not your concern, her father's voice hisses closer to her ear than she would like. You are a disappointment. I expected better from you. You need to do more. Doing more is exhausting, Celia protests. I can only control so much. It's not enough, her father says. When will it be enough? Celia asks, but there is no reply, and she stands alone amongst the stars. She sinks to the ground, picking up a handful of pearl white sand and letting it fall slowly through her fingers. Alone in his flat, Marco constructs a tiny room from scraps of paper, hallways and doors crafted from pages of books and bits of blueprints, pieces of wallpaper and fragments of letters. He composes chambers that lead into others that Celia has created, stairs that wind around her halls, leaving spaces open for her to respond. Oh my god, that's beautiful! Okay, I'm gonna read another little part because it's short. The ticking of the clock. Vienna, January 1894. The office is large, but looks smaller than it is due to the volume of its contents. While a great deal of its walls are composed of frosted glass, most of it's obscured by cabinets and shelves. The drafting table by the windows is all but hidden in the meticulously ordered chaos of papers and diagrams and blueprints. The bespectacled man seated behind it is almost invisible, blending in with his surroundings. The sound of his pencil scratching against paper is as methodical and precise as the ticking of the clock in the corner. There's a knock on the frosted glass door, and the scratching pencil halts, though the ticking clock pays no heed. "A Miss Burgess to see you, sir," an assistant calls from the open door. "She says not to bother you if you're otherwise occupied." "Not a bother at all," Mr. Barris says, placing his pencil down and rising from his seat. "Please, send her in." The assistant moves from the doorway and is replaced by a young woman in a stylish lace-trimmed dress. "Hello, Ethan," Tara Burgess says. "My apologies for dropping by unannounced." "No apologies necessary, my dear Tara. You look lovely, as always," Mr. Barris says, kissing her on both cheeks. "And you haven't aged a day," Tara says pointedly. His smile wavers, and he looks away, moving to close the door behind her. "What brings you to Vienna?" he asks. "And where is your sister? I so rarely see the two of you apart." "Lainey's in Dublin with a circus," Tara says, turning her attention to the contents of the room. I wasn't in the mood, so I thought I would do some traveling of my own. Visiting far-flung friends seemed a good place to start. I would have sent a telegram, but it was all a bit spontaneous, and I wasn't entirely sure if I would be welcome." "You're always welcome, Tara," Mr. Barris says. He offers her a seat, but she does not notice, drifting through the tables covered in highly detailed models of buildings, stopping here and there to investigate a detail further, an arch of a doorway, the spiral of a staircase. "It becomes difficult to tell the difference between old friends and business associates in cases like ours, I think," Tara says, "whether we are the kind of people who make polite conversation to cover share secrets or something more than that. This one's marvelous," she adds, pausing at a model of an elaborate open column with a clock suspended in the center. "Thank you," Mr. Barris says. "It's quite far from completion. I need to send the finished plans to Friedrich so he can start construction on the clock. I suspect it will be much more impressive when built to scale." "Do you have plans for the circus here?" Tara asks, looking over the diagrams pinned to the walls. "No, I don't, actually. I left them with Marco in London. I meant to keep copies on file, but I must have forgotten." "Do you forget to keep copies of any of your other plans?" Tara asks, running a finger along the line of cabinets fitted with long, thin shelves, each one piled with carefully ordered papers. "No," Mr. Barris says. Do you find that strange?" Tara asks. "Not particularly," Mr. Barris says. "Do you think it's strange?" "Tara, you really need to stop digging. I feel like something is going to happen." "I think a great many things about the circus strange," Tara says, fidgeting with the lace at the cuff of her sleeve. Mr. Barris sits at his desk, leaning back in his chair. "Are we going to discuss whatever it is you're here to discuss instead of dancing around it?" he asks. "I was never a particularly good dancer." "I know for a fact that that's not true," Tara says, settling into the chair opposite, though her gaze continues to wander around the room. "But it would be nice to be direct for a change. I sometimes wonder if any of us remember how. Why did you leave London?" "I suspect I left London for much the same reasons that you and your sister travel so often," Mr. Barris says, a few too many curious looks and backhanded compliments. "I doubt anyone realized that the day my hair stopped thinning was the same as the opening night of the circus, but they begin to notice after a time. While our Tanta Padma might simply be aging well, and anything and everything about Chandrash can be written off as eccentric, we are put under a different kind of scrutiny by being somewhat closer to the ordinary. It is easier for those who can simply disappear into the circus," Tara says, gazing out the window. "Once in a while, Lainey suggests that we follow it around ourselves, but I think that would only be a temporary solution. We are too mercurial for our own good." "You could just let it go," Mr. Barris says quietly. Tara shakes her head. "How many years until moving cities becomes insufficient? What is the solution beyond that? Changing our names? I do not enjoy being forced into such deceptions." "I don't know," Mr. Barris says. "There's a great deal more going on that we are privy to. Of that I'm quite sure," Tara says with a sigh. "I tried to talk to Chandrash, but it was like we were speaking two different languages. I do not like sitting idly by when something clearly isn't right. I feel not trapped, but something like it, and I don't know what to do about it." "And you're looking for answers," Mr. Barris says. "I don't know what I'm looking for," Tara responds, and for a moment her face crumples as though she might burst into tears, but then she composes herself. "Ethan, do you sometimes feel like you're dreaming all the time?" "No, I can't say I do." "I'm finding it difficult to discern between asleep and awake," Tara says, tugging at her lace cuffs again. "I do not like being left in the dark. I'm not particularly fond of believing in impossible things." Poor Tara. Mr. Barris takes off his spectacles, wiping the lenses with a handkerchief before he replies, holding them up to the light to check for rogue smudges. I have seen a great many things that I might have once considered impossible, or unbelievable. I find I no longer have clearly defined parameters for such matters. I choose to do my own work to the best of my own abilities and leave others to their own. He pulled open a drawer at the desk after searching for a moment, he takes out a business card that contains only a single name. Even looking at it upside down, Tarla can easily discern the A and the H, if nothing else. Don't do that. Don't do that. Mr. Barris picks up a pencil and writes a London address beneath the printed name. I don't think any of us knew that night precisely what we were getting ourselves into, he says. If you insist on delving deeper into all of this, I think he might be the only one of us that might help, though I cannot guarantee he will be entirely forthcoming. Okay, so the thing is, I have read this book several times before, but it was such a long time ago that I am fuzzy on some of the plot points. So some things I know that will happen, and I don't want to spoil them in case this is your first time reading the book. So I'm going to try to keep my comments neutral into what kind of comments I had, or may have had, the first time I read the book. Anyway, it's just Alexander's an asshole, and he's even more cold and distant than Hector. I think because he's lived longer. I don't know. He slides the card across the desk to Tara. She regards it carefully before slipping it into her bag, as though she's not entirely sure it's real. Thank you, Ethan, she says without looking at him. I appreciate this, truly. You're welcome, my dear, Mr. Barris says. I hope you find what you're looking for. Tara only nods distractedly, and then they discuss other matters of little import while the clock ticks to the afternoon hours and the light beyond the frosted glass windows fades considerably. Though he asks her to join him for dinner, she declines politely and leaves alone. Mr. Barris returns to his drafting table, scratching pencil and ticking clock in harmony once more. Well, later.